Hi, everyone, and welcome to Light a Joint with Ida. I am here with Connie Sparrow. We're having a few technical difficulties that I'm working through. I'm live on YouTube right now, and I'm going to log into my Facebook page and see if I can possibly get us to go live and Light a Joint with Ida.
Look at you with all of your tech solutions.
Yeah, well, I'm not that technical.
With your glasses.
Yeah, I need them now every day. All right, how do I go live?
There you go.
Here we go. All right, let's see if I can set that right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just on me. Rotate the phone.
There you go.
I can't do it while recording. Okay. Shoot. How do we're going to angle the phone like this.
There you go. And then I'll scooch over.
There. Okay. Oh my gosh.
See, we fixed it. All fixed.
Okay. I had some issues with my computer. Yeah, glitched, whatever. We're here.
It works.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for, having me over at your house and
Yeah.
inviting me. And I love your house, by the way.
Thank you.
So real quick, we have to talk about what you're doing here.
Yeah.
What exactly are you transitioning your home into?
So we're transitioning our home into, a lot of people will call it a bed and breakfast, but it is actually a lot different than that. It's more of a concierge cannabis experience for guests that are interested in securing, cannabis-friendly accommodations in the state of Michigan that are traveling here. There's a lot of states that still aren't legal.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an entire market opportunity there for people who aren't in legal states to, sorry. Hey, Dan, could you grab the dogs, please?
This is what happens when you go live.
Yeah, sorry. And the puppy. And so, as we're looking at the way that cannabis is evolving in the state of Michigan, as we're looking at what people are looking for, and as Michigan continues to thrive on the tourism side of things, when you have a state that puts millions of dollars a year into tourism, there's always market potential there. So what we're looking to do here is it's basically a space that can be used. It sleeps 18 for businesses that are interested in coming and doing strategic planning or, group team building and things like that.
Nice.
But then also we want the ability for somebody like you who maybe wants to do a women's retreat or something like that can come and use and rent the facility and have a nice kind of cozy environment that's very private, where you can explore cannabis and you can have conversations with people about cannabis. And so it is a bed and breakfast to some level, but it's actually more of a meeting space. It's a space to gather people and to either provide people opportunities to go like on a charter sailboat and, an infusion chef on a Thursday through Sunday kind of weekend getaway. And so we're going to do some really strategic kind of public consumer specific kind of situations, but then we're also going to start working with the brands on how to activate brands in the tourism space.
Oh, wow.
So what's interesting about that is as all these brands are fighting over shelf space, they're fighting over, they're trying to make their product positioned differently in different areas. The one thing that I learned out of Cannabis actually was that brands will activate in all kinds of different ways to get to a cannabis consumer, because I think a cannabis consumer is different than a consumer of many other things, right?
Right.
There is a culture and a community. That's why your podcast is called Light a Joint with Ida, right? There's a culture and community that exists there that is very personal. And it as I've grown up in cannabis, as a newbie to cannabis and one that was more of a war on drugs kind of person, right? With my career prior to cannabis, you look and you see that it's a very personal brand activation. And it's very much about your physical reaction to the cannabis that you're consuming and whatever fashion you're consuming it. And that's another part of it too. Like,
right.
There are people who are dabbers. There are people who smoke joints. There are people who are like me that are edibles. There are also people that are recreational versus people who are truly medical and are using it as a medicine. Those are all very personal conversations.
Exactly. Yes.
And so what's happened is as we've talked to brands about it, they're like, oh, so like we could activate one of the rooms. Yes.
Mhm.
So, have your swag up there, have your paraphernalia, and then the nice thing is, we'll get their cannabis pre-ordered and it'll be waiting for them when they get here.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love this concept.
And so what you're doing is you're basically leveraging an industry that already exists.
Right.
And then you're leveraging what we already know the state makes investments in marketing and advertising over, like Pure Michigan. And you're maximizing those two pieces to create a hole to fill.
Right.
And
I love that.
And, you see, you can go and you'll see, like, if you do, I've done a lot of market research, and you see a lot of people asking questions like, can we go for a cultivation tour? We're from a state that's not legal. We don't know what this looks like. Can we do this? Can we do that? And what's nice is that people want an open, it's funny. People try to ask me to explain it. I'm like, it's kind of like going on a cruise. And then when you register for that cruise, you get to pick out a bunch of shore excursions, right?
Right.
You go swim with dolphins, you go on the glass bottom boats or whatever it is. That's basically what this is. This is a cannabis shore excursions.
Right.
Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to have a infusion chef? Do you want to learn how to harvest your own cannabis with our back garden, with our plants, because we plant our own plants here on our property. We grow our own.
That's so exciting.
And so we could do a Croptober, new cannabis consumers, come and learn how to harvest, learn what the plant's about. We have a homemade press in the basement. They could press.
Do you really?
Yeah, we do. Right?
See that.
Dan and my brother James engineered it. I forgot to show it to you.
Yeah, okay, we're going down the basement.
And so, it's some of these things that when you put them all together, they make sense because like somebody like me, for instance, that was not accustomed to the cannabis community, but was also seeking out treatments for insomnia and autism and ADHD and the fact that I wasn't sleeping for like a decade, right? And I was on all these pharmaceutical medications. It's also people like me that were brainwashed by, the DARE campaigns and the drug, the war on drugs. I mean, I'm 44 years old. I mean, my entire childhood was brainwashing as it relates to cannabis.
Unfortunately.
And then you go into public safety and then eventually into Homeland Security, then pot really is bad. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Then it really is bad. Like it is the rules that I have to live within. And so my husband, Dan Sparrow, has been pretty integral to opening my eyes. I remember when we first started dating, he was like, Connie, I don't think you understand. A lot of people smoke weed.
Right.
I think more than you probably are aware of. Most of your colleagues probably, and I'm like, whatever. No, they don't.
Right.
Well, I'm learning that it was actually more widely accepted amongst my peer groups than I thought it was.
Right.
And it was more about my professional career.
Okay.
And why I was isolated from that environment.
So let's go back to the beginning. So where were you born? Are you originally from Michigan?
Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids. Okay.
Born in Grand Rapids.
And then what was your family's stance as far as cannabis?
So my dad was very much a cannabis enthusiast in college. Okay. My mom was not so much. And my dad, eventually, went to law school and became an attorney. Actually, their forward facing position to me was that they were not in support of cannabis. Only until I happened to walk into my house at my open house and they were smoking a joint. And so I was like,
wait a minute,
this is weird. And they kind of panicked a little bit. And I'm like, I don't give a crap, like whatever, but don't lie to me,
Right.
And so, my dad was definitely a 60s and 70s hippie kid in college, right? Okay. And so he definitely had his time with drugs of any kind in that terminology, which was, the terminology in his age when it was, when cannabis was prohibited. And so, it was funny on that day, and I'll never forget it because after I walked in the house and realized what was going on, I had to go move like one of their friends' cars, and I'm moving the car and there's 7 joints like on the console. Right.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, so this is like a normal thing. Like, this isn't like, oh, we got a little bit drunk and had a good time and let's, try some reefer that somebody brought.
Right.
Like, no, he had like 7 joints rolled in his car. And I'm like, oh, Fred's a pot smoker. Nice to know. But so that,
Guys.
yeah, well, and so for me, it was like, it was kind of a hypocrisy, but then at the same time, it was like, well, maybe I don't know enough about this. But then my career went on, and I continued to be in public safety, and then forms of law enforcement, and Homeland Security and healthcare compliance, right? And in the healthcare field, you can't smoke weed, you test positive,
right.
you don't have a job.
Right.
And so, it was just very taboo. And anytime if you work for state government, you can't smoke cannabis because of drug testing. And so, when I first met Dan, he really, we disc golf, right? And so he'd go disc golfing with his friends. Yeah, no, and they would go all the time. And obviously they were smoking weed while they were disc golfing. Right. And that was, it was a normal part of Dan's life. For me, it was something that the culture of my colleagues or my friends, because your colleagues typically become your friends, right, was just not accepting of cannabis. So,
and at this time, what was your career when you met Dan?
At that time, I was working for, I was overseeing Region 6 as our bioterrorism coordinator. So Region 6 is 13 counties in the state of Michigan.
Okay, so how does one get a position like that?
First of all, well, so what happens is you break your back on a call, and you get as a paramedic. I was a paramedic for 15 years. I was actually practicing in the field for about 6.
Okay, so that's how you first started out as a paramedic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My daughter was born 3 months premature, and I wanted to go to med school, but obviously with a neonatal newborn, that wasn't happening. And it was actually the neonatologist, Dr. Kinney. I'll never forget it. He walked in on rounds. I was sitting at her incubator, and I was there just with her, right? And they were on rounds, and he walked up and he said, "You're just doing so well with her." Because I was young, I was 18. Right. You're doing so well with her. Have you ever thought about, because I was studying for my finals while I was in the NICU, because I was in college when it happened. Okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm at Grand Valley, and I'm, pre-med, and I'm trying to go to med school. And he looked at me and he was like, "You're handling her very well, and it's a very difficult patient to handle. Have you ever thought about being a paramedic?" And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "I think you can do this. Oh my goodness. You're good at it." And so I went to paramedic school. Okay. 2 months later. Wow. Now, how long is that? Well, so there's various levels. And it's nice because EMS really is tailored towards, it's skilled trade versus an actual, it's gone into a degree process for an associate. Okay. But it's a lot like how LPNs and RNs, 2-year RNs get there. It's 2 years of training. You have to do clinical study. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, so no. You're investing quite a bit of time. Absolutely. Yeah. So you end up doing hundreds of hours of clinical rotations. You end up, working in the field. You end up going to school, and it's like on the job training, a lot of it, which is why EMS is a great career. Okay. Because you can have a baby or raise a family and go to school because you're paid for your school and you're working at that ambulance service while you're getting that training. Nice. Okay. Yeah. And and the training's through community college. So you're getting college credit. And now they've gotten it to a point, like when I was in school way back when, remember, paramedics were still chasing calls in hearses in the late 70s. Oh my goodness, were they really? Yeah. So fast forward to Connie gets her paramedic license, in 1999. Oh my goodness. We weren't that far off of the evolution of still picking people up and throwing them in the back of a hearse and running them to the hospital. That's okay. Right. And sounds crazy. And a lot of people don't think of that. But if you think about shows like Emergency that was on TV in the 70s, they were picking them up and throwing them into the back of what looks like a hearse. You're right. Except it was painted white, and they're rushing them to the hospital. Yeah. It wasn't necessarily a clinical performance that you were doing in the 70s. And so in the time where things really evolved, I had just become a paramedic. And so you were able to innovate, and you were able to do cardiac monitoring. You were able to give medications and do invasive procedures. Triage a little bit before you were transferred to the hospital. Exactly. Yeah. And you were actually doing patient care. Okay. Not just like picking them up and, stopping a bleed, right? Like, that's what it was though. Wow. There was no advanced medicine related to it. So it was very exciting, but the problem is that it's very dangerous for your body, because you're literally trying to take care of people, lift them, carry them places. So, and you said that you broke your back. I did. I fractured. How
How did you do that?
I was carrying a man down a flight of stairs. He was a very large man who had just got put on blood pressure medication.
Okay.
And when you get put on blood pressure medication and you get into a hot shower, makes you pass out.
Oh, shit. Seriously?
That's seriously what happened.
Okay.
So he banged his head and he had a little cut because it was a tile shower. And I was like, well, we got it, we should take you in. It was out of an abundance of caution. He obviously was fine when we got there, but
Right.
He did have a pretty big laceration on his head, and that's an indicator you should go to the hospital and get your nugget checked out. And so it was just my partner and I, because it was a really busy day, so we had no fire backup to help us, and he was about 300 pounds.
Oh, wow.
On a backboard, and it was just the two of us. And
Oh, my goodness.
I was at the top of the stairs, my partner was at the bottom, or I was at the top of the stairs at the head of the board.
Yeah.
My partner was at the feet about 5 steps down, and we were just going to take it a slow step by step. But there was nowhere to brace yourself because it was a cascading staircase. So usually you can brace against a wall, hold tight, and you can get step down safely.
Right.
There wasn't any walls to brace against. And my partner dropped his end of the board, and I sat at the head of the backboard, kind of kneeled over, reaching over my knees and holding it for like 15 minutes, waiting for fire to get there.
Oh my goodness, Connie.
Oh
my goodness.
The problem was, and I didn't think about it, and people need to understand that your spine is very much like rubber,
Yes.
right? It's a very connective, rubbery piece of tissue. It's a nerve, right?
Right.
A pretty thick one, and it's very similar to a tendon or a ligament's kind of, stretchiness.
Okay.
Right. And I didn't realize what 300 pounds of tension looks like when I let it all go immediately. And that's what happened.
Oh,
It all,
no, it snapped back.
it snapped all the way back when I
Ooh.
let that tension go, and
Ooh.
it crushed those 3 vertebrae and then fractured all 5.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you poor thing.
It sounded very bad, I promise.
Oh.
I said, we have a problem. I need to go to the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was a blessing in disguise, because that's how I got into Homeland Security and working, as a bioterrorism coordinator was, I got to go back to school. Thank God for AMR in Grand Rapids. They were very great with, settling out my injury because I lost my career.
Right.
And I had just gotten my critical care transport license, which is an even more elite transport license. I was doing ground backup transport for babies like Madeline, right? So I was fulfilling that circle, right? And so I just gotten that certification, was getting ready to get on the baby buses, and 3 weeks after I passed those tests is when I broke my back. So it was
you
just,
poor thing. Oh my
it
goodness.
was devastating, but at the same time, it was a blessing. So I went back to school to get my bachelor's, just with the return to work program that AMR offered me. And my internship was with a professor at Grand Valley who was the bioterrorism task force coordinator for the region. And he took me in, and then that's when my career in pandemic planning and emergency management and incident command, and I'm on a national level 3 incident management team as a public information officer. So I can be deployed to wildfires to serve on a role on an incident management team. And
that's
stuff.
impressive, Connie. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, seriously, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, really, like, how many people do you talk to who actually have the skills that you have?
So I mean, it was a great career path.
Exactly.
I mean, it was, but and the problem with that is that a lot of that is grant funded money, right? Those programs are funded by grants, and it depends on what grants are coming down the line. And when the grants start to dry up, you need to start looking at some stability.
Right.
And so then I actually transitioned from that into grant management administration, and then public policy and planning. So I went from the highest levels of government down to the local level. So I kind of did the flip of what everybody else usually does. Is there a policy person that starts locally, climbs to state, climbs to national? I decided for some weird reason to flip it the other way. And quickly got very frustrated with the politics, and the local politics was a lot.
Yes.
And I just kind of decided, you know what? I'm ready to do something else. And I came home and told Dan that I was quitting my job. And he said, what? I said, no, I'm quitting my job. And he's like, and I
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I usually
I would have
don't.
offered you before.
No, I usually don't, but sometimes I will.
So what's the difference for you for like an edible versus a joint?
So it's interesting. It depends on the joint.
Okay.
And Dan helps me with that a lot. I am extremely sensitive to flower,
Okay.
whatever strain that is. What is that?
This is
Homegrown?
Harambe pie.
Oh, that's
Yep,
good weed.
homegrown.
It's not even harsh. That's
I know.
nice.
I
I didn't
know.
even cough.
I know.
That's wonderful.
This
Nice
is-
job, homegrown.
This is like one of my favorite strains.
Really?
Want some more? Take it.
Yeah.
I can roll another one, chick.
And so
that's why you don't like to smoke.
Well, yeah, and
joints.
I'm a woman who had C-sections, and any woman on your podcast knows.
Yeah.
We all know what that feels like. Here you go. And so, but flower, I'm very sensitive to different strains of flower and their terps.
Okay.
I'm definitely somebody that's a purple punch or the purplies, the granddaddy purple.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much in that area where the purples just aren't quite as, they're sativity enough to make me creative.
Okay.
But not like some strains that are super energetic are absolute devastation to me because my brain just starts running, right?
Right.
So I just always have to be careful with flower.
And that's why it's so important. I mean, to go slow.
Yes.
To test it out, see how it's going to affect you, whether you like it or not.
Exactly.
And then increase from there, or try different products.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so the other thing that I do use cannabis pretty regularly for is for my hand. I got into a bad car accident. I don't know if you can see it on there.
Yeah.
But one finger is very much fatter than the other one.
Right.
And so the topicals actually help and give me range of motion and help with inflammation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so active cannabis use for me, when it stays in my system, actually helps to manage this recurring. This is actually a really good day for my finger.
Mm-hmm.
But it's called tenosynovitis, and having active cannabinoids in my system actually helps manage this inflammation.
Wow.
That's
incredible, Connie.
Yeah, that's one of the things I started noticing was that, at one point, I've had surgery on it. Like they've had to cut it open.
Oh my goodness.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
Right. You can see that zipper.
Right.
It's had to be cut open from here to here twice.
Oof.
And I'm just not doing that again.
Right.
And so I would never be able to do this if I have active cannabinoids in my system.
Okay.
I can't. Hey, Marley, let's go outside. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're
Come
fine.
on, Marley, outside.
This is what happens when you're live in people's homes.
And so, I just started noticing as I started exploring it. And Dan was the one that was like, use cannabis for your insomnia. And, we went and bought me a one hitter and I started using that. Not like I'd ever used a one hitter before. I mean, like fish out of water level stuff. Right. And so, I started using one hitter and then, we went and got our med cards because I realized and I started seeing the value in it. And we started working with a caregiver, and I saw the value of everything that was happening as it related to some symptoms in my system that were really quite difficult to deal with.
Okay.
Insomnia and then my finger. I mean,
Right.
I type for a living.
That's a huge quality of life right there.
That is. This thing is exceptionally painful.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's a constant pain. And so to have range of motion, I still don't have grip strength, but I'm never going to because this tendon is messed up. So like small packaging, anybody that's in packaging.
Well, and it's saying that, yes.
That's a huge thing for me. It really frustrates me.
Yes, you're unable to open it.
Correct.
Yes. So it's like how I was thinking about that the other day. It's like, how do we help older people?
It's a problem.
Who have ailments that we physically are unable to open.
And that's the problem I have with all of these. And I get the child safety locks and I get all of it.
Right.
But the problem is that the gummy bags, those are almost impossible for me to open. And it's like, I wish that, people would take that into consideration. So what I do is I cut all my bags open and I don't even do it. Dan does it because he's awesome and, puts it in Tupperware for me.
Okay. Yeah.
And just so that I don't have to because I'll sit there
that way for you.
Yeah. And it's just a lot easier for me. But I don't have little kids running around that I have to worry about either. Right. Like our kids are grown. And so I don't have to take those precautions. So for me, it's not that big of a deal, but yeah.
It's lighter.
But yeah, the whole concept with my grandma had terrible arthritis. I can't imagine how she would have dealt with any of this.
So I know it's interesting. Let's go back to you came home and told Dan that you were quitting your job.
Yeah, I quit my job. And I just kind of looked at them and I said, the county was struggling. They couldn't pay for their jail. Right. We had just built a new jail that they couldn't pay for. And, I just said, I think I'm better at going off independent contractor with the county and working on projects rather than because it could save them money because I had benefits with Dan, I could save money that way. There was lots of ways that it was beneficial to both me and to the county. Okay. And so I'd gone to Muskegon County and said, I want to go off independent contractor. It'll save you guys some money. It'll save a couple jobs in the clerk's office. And I'll just switch to an independent contractor relationship. And no, I'm good. Thanks. And at first the county was a little bit hesitant. They're like, what? You're offering to quit? And I was like, well, not quit. It just looks different, right? It's just a different way to finance it, whatever. But it helps you guys with your budget. So yeah, so that's what I did was I went off independent contractors. The county wrote my articles of incorporation. Oh, wow. They helped me start Sparrow. Okay. They were very excited about. That is exciting. Yeah, they were embracing. They were. In fact, they brought a resolution to our county board and they did a vote on it and everything. It was a whole big ceremony. Half of the commissioners voted no because they didn't want me to leave, but obviously they were just being sentimental. But it was very much it was a terrifying moment for me and for Dan. I mean, that was a huge risk. And I cashed out what little bit of money I maybe had saved up in my 401k, and I bought a laptop and I outfitted my office and I made a little investment in myself. And and I had grant contracts coming in. I had community planning projects coming in. I was writing recreational plans and master plans and grant applications and project proposals for development entities and things like that. And it's like, okay, this isn't bad. And it was nice because it was just my little side, my little hustle. Right. Okay. And I had no idea it was going to evolve. Right. I thought I was just going to work from home. Okay. And I was a contractor for the county. Well, as a contractor for the county, when people would call in asking about grant support, the county obviously would just refer them to my cell phone number. And I had a caregiver from Hart, Michigan, call me and ask me about a HOPS grant. Oh. So I went up to Hart, Michigan. I remember calling my mom and saying, hey, I'm doing this visit, right? Oh my goodness. I don't know who this is. I don't know where I'm at, but I'm in the middle of nowhere in Hart, Michigan. So if you don't hear from me in 3 hours, you may need to call somebody. Right? Goodness. I didn't know what to expect. And I got there and, he has lots of acreage and he's like, I don't know what to do, blah, 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 blah. But I'm thinking about planting hops. And I was kind of going through some of the opportunities grant wise for the hops. And then I quickly realized that there was something else going on. And it would just so happen that I was actually doing the Laura. Oh, interesting. The Laura grants that were coming out of Laura for education and outreach. You helped write those or you wrote those? Yeah, managed them and administered them. Oh my gosh, Connie. Yeah. And that's a huge accomplishment. So I was working on all the Laura stuff with law enforcement on, all of the outreach and education for caregivers and quickly realized that was actually just money for raids. And I was like, oh, that's not what this grant is for. No, that was another example of a grant that I was in charge of managing that was not being executed the way that I had written it. Right. And when I was getting the reports back, I was like, why are there asset seizures on this? These are education and outreach grants that were intended to educate them on the rules and their system of caregiving. I'm really confused as to what's going on. And I started asking questions as an independent contractor. Oh my goodness. To the prosecutor's office. Oh my goodness. And I was definitely a little bit like, huh. And so as that was happening, I was realizing that these LARA grants were not being used to teach or provide caregivers the education to ensure their compliance, and it was actually being used to fund drug enforcement task forces.
Oh my goodness.
I kind of got
devastating.
well, on top of that, the other part was that I learned the law, right? Because I was the one administering these grants, because I was starting to go, what the hell is going on?
Right.
So that was at the exact time that MMFLA was coming forward. Okay. I was working with the prosecutor's office on what this law looks like, what it looks like from their perspective. Mm-hmm. I was also administering the LARA grants on behalf of the county in partnership with the city of Muskegon. And then this caregiver calls me, Jace Guitars, calls me up in Hart, and I get up there and I'm like, the laws are changing, right? He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, this thing's getting turned into a commercial system. Like, this is going to be available in a couple months.
Right.
He was like, what? His mind was blown. And I said, the only reason why I know this, and I'm deathly afraid to even tell you, right? Because at the time I was working for the prosecutor's office.
Right,
what caregiver wants some woman working with a prosecutor in their house? It was an awkward situation.
Wow.
And so I said, yeah, I looked at him and I said, why don't you try to do that instead? You love growing weed, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, why don't you do this instead? And he just kind of looks at me and he goes, yeah, why don't we do that? And I was like, okay, let's figure it out, right? And so that's how I wrote my first business plan for a license. That's how I wrote my first app. My experience from the prosecutor's office laid me right into MMFLA. I knew what was going on with the caregivers from the outreach grants and how that was being managed. And then there's this caregiver. And I said, I'll do it. But it was a trip, because I said, well, I think and I didn't know how to charge it. I had no idea, but I wasn't going to turn it away. Right. And I'm like, well, I think a $2,000 down payment would be okay.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
He comes out of a room where he's got $5,000. I've never seen $5,000 in cash in my life, right?
Awesome.
I'm like, holy shit, what's going on? Right? I'm kind of freaking. Remember, I'm still a contractor with a prosecutor's office.
My God, I love this.
Right? Awesome. And so I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
This is real life.
Yeah, this is crazy. What have I entered in? And so that was my first experience, right?
Okay.
And I got home. And Dan gets home from work, because Dan's still working as a process engineer, right? And I got home from this meeting and the cash is sitting on the counter, right? And I'm sitting out in the garage, and because we'd usually sit out in the garage and chit chat after he got home from work, play with the dogs and stuff. And he walks up to me and he said, why is there thousands of dollars on our counter? And I was like, well, so this happened. And he was like, what? I said, swear to God, this is my day today.
We have a new business.
Yeah. I said, I think we're doing this. Well, what I didn't know was how underground connected the caregivers were. And then it wasn't one caregiver, it was 2 caregivers, it was 5 caregivers, it was 8 caregivers. And I was like, ruh-roh, rascal, we just got busy. And so I took on
right place, right time.
And it was actually. Yes. And so I took on a bunch of new caregivers, and I quickly realized that I needed help. And so I went to Dan and I said, I need somebody to do sales and manage the clients, because I have to write all these apps. There's too many clients for me to do both sides of it now. Yes. So I need you to come into this, and Dan's the perfect guy for that. Good Lord. He can sell snow to an Eskimo. And I'm dead serious. And so what was really crazy was, I think our first year, I was, our revenue was $65,000 at the end of the year, right?
Wow. Okay.
For my first year in business.
Wow.
It's pretty good.
That's really good.
It's pretty good.
That's incredible.
Right. And I started in July. So
half a year.
Wow. Then the second year, when it was just me, I think I stayed in the 75 to 80,000 mark, and I was really proud of myself. My goal was to be able to provide replacing my income that I brought into our home, and then also pay for our benefits if we needed to get them independently. Yes. That was my business target, to be able to get this to be sustainable.
Right.
And then I got a call from Nirvana Center.
Mhm.
And that's when our world really changed, because we pretty much carried that group's entire vision for Michigan forward.
Oh, wow. Connie.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Nirvana Center is a family owned company.
Mhm.
You know, it's originally from Arizona. Shiraz and Sarah are wonderful people. They were very, very, very fun to work with. And Ray was very fun to work with. And what ended up, and they actually were a godsend in the pandemic. We ended up taking on their, 12 site vision.
Mhm.
That is when, and then Dan really started to get his footings in with networking amongst cannabis people. I mean, he was out talking to realtors and
Mhm.
helping scout property and things like that. And we were really kind of getting all sides of consulting, where I was mastering the licensing side of it. Dan was getting to know, the zoning and the buildings and the way that
Oh, my
cannabis works
goodness.
at the local
Okay.
level. And he's
Right.
working with our clients, kind of hand-holding with them.
Right.
And being a business coach,
Mhm.
right? Because that's what we really are, business coaches. I just specialize in compliance.
Which is a bonus.
Exactly. Yeah.
Come on.
Exactly. Finance and compliance.
Yes,
And so,
yes.
it evolved into, once Nirvana Center came along, I mean, the year before the pandemic, we were $1.9 million in sales.
Oh my goodness, chick.
I mean,
That's
that's a pretty exceptional business
Yes,
trajectory.
Yes.
And then COVID happened, but you get through it. For us, we've always known that licensing was going to eventually fall off. It's the first side of the development,
Yeah,
right?
yes,
And so we've always been looking at ways to pivot. How are you going to pivot? Where are you going to pivot? How do you monetize differently? How do you create passive forms of income and things like that?
Mhm.
We've been very fortunate to work with two groups of people that were kind enough to offer us a small percent partnership
Mhm.
in their operations, which gives us a little bit of, an ownership to it, which gives us a little bit of passion towards those projects, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And it just,
which is important, because
it
when you
is.
feel like you have a personal stake in something, you're going to work a little bit harder.
I agree.
Yes.
And so, great groups of people too.
Mhm.
I think, that's, and what's nice is that it's just it's just a stock option for just doing good work, right?
Exactly.
That's all that is.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it is pivoting into the event and the
Mhm.
hospitality space.
Mhm.
As I'm watching this, this whole thing go, this whole market, and I saw it from the government side at a very young aspect.
Yes,
I was on the other side of it, but I was there,
Right.
questioning what was going on.
Right.
And I'm seeing the market fluctuations now. Licensing is always going to be a risky business.
Mhm.
Becoming a licensee is going to be risky.
Mhm.
You already know you don't have bankruptcy protections. You already know that banking is difficult. You already know finance
Mhm.
is difficult, right? Getting financing, getting lending, whatever.
Right.
Even for some people, they struggle with finding a mortgage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
it's a risky
Right.
business.
Right.
But there's tons of risk averse ways to be in cannabis
Mhm.
without having a license.
Mhm.
And the event planner, the temporary event organizer, the event organizer license is a great way to be a licensee,
Right.
and capitalize on hospitality and tourism.
Exactly. Yes.
And create a business case for that.
So interesting you said that. I know Cannabash, you had no intentions. You didn't even start Cannabash. That wasn't your idea.
It was not.
You were not involved at all. What happened with that? How did that come to be?
Well, so I had approached Dan and I had really noodled through, what this event organizer license looked like.
Mhm.
It was something that one of our clients, Deborah Alja, she's Cannabis Lucas Cafe in Sands Township, which is just south of Marquette in the UP.
Mhm.
I had told her, I think that I want to look at this event organizer license. I'm kind of curious as to what that is. And she's like, well, okay, well, let's just do it under my prequel, whatever, I'll help. Because, it was in the middle of pandemic and we're a small business.
Right.
And she's like, I'll help. That's not a big deal. Like, let's get this figured out. Just do the paperwork and put it on the 10 under and go. Okay. So I submitted all the paperwork in and everything. And I went to the township once we got that back. And I said, tourism's pretty big. And Jennifer Hodges, the township supervisor, is pretty open-minded about stuff. I said, tourism is really big. I think this might be I'd like to do an event at Softball World. It could use a little bit of love and a little bit of affection. You know, the only thing that really happens there is softball, but it's 22 acres. There's lots of things that could happen there.
Right.
And then bring some economic development to the community. But I had in mind a charity kickball tournament.
Okay.
So the township, regardless, started working on opting in Softball World for events. The township reached out to the operators once the ordinance was passed and said to the township dispos and the township cultivator, why don't you all get together and let's do an event to celebrate legalization of cannabis, recreational legalization of cannabis in Muskegon Township.
Okay.
That was the concept of Cannabash, was the industry celebrating its recreational legalization and then destigmatizing it to our community. And Muskegon Township is trying to destigmatize it to its residents. Yes.
That's wonderful.
So they all sat down and they had an event organizer that was a part of the group, her and her staff. And she ended up having a family issue of some kind that she had to resign. They did reach out to me even before that event organizer had resigned and said, we'd like the Equity Foundation to be a part of this, because I had gone to them and said, can you guys do this? I think they were feeling like, you know, let's include Connie. This was kind of a little bit her idea. I wouldn't have cared either way. Thank you for being gracious, but you know, whatever. And so I had signed on to be, you know, the fiduciary or the caretaker of the funds. And basically what we did was all of the operators signed a memorandum of understanding that they vote on the decisions. And then I report and track the money and account for the money. And that there's some accountability and oversight there for this group of people putting this kind of community gathering on. You see that a lot when you see local festivals for, like, you know, municipalities and things like that. They'll put festival committees together, right?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what this group did. Well, when the event organizer, and I had signed on to be fiduciary, so I was beginning to attend the meetings. Well, then I started realizing what was happening, and I got a phone call saying that she was having some family commitment things, and could I take over as event organizer? And I was like, it's 3 months away. Whoa, there's no way. There's no way. I know nothing about stage and music production. There's just wow. I was really, it was risky. Let's put it that way. And honestly, I wasn't even willing to do it until they backed the date off. They actually wanted to do it in June. And I was like, this isn't happening. I don't even have enough time to get the state license together. This isn't, you guys have to push it off. So so we took the skeleton of the planning that had been put in place by the group. We gave it a little bit of parameters and framework with voting and kind of agreeing and disagreeing and how the money is kept and tracked and reported. And then, and then we kind of executed their plan that they'd laid out. And it was a success. I mean,
Cannabash was amazing.
Yeah.
I had so much fun. I mean, from start to finish, it was beautiful.
I'm glad.
There was everywhere you turned,
there was something going on.
It was gorgeous.
And that was the goal was with Cannabash was to embrace the culture of music and cannabis, right? Because a lot of people, I don't think, understand the deep culture that music has in cannabis.
Yes.
Bring in a diverse music group, because we seem to have a problem getting hip hop here on the west side of the state. Not sure why that is. And then on top of that, bring in musical talent that was the industry. So we were very specific on who our music talent was, because a good majority of them are Michigan licensees.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So that was all very strategic. And then it was very strategic in how we laid out the market experience, the food experience. We wanted people to feel like they didn't have to watch the concert if they didn't want to.
Right.
We also wanted the public to be able to see what a public consumption event looks like with lots of people. And I think it was important for our community.
How many people showed up?
7,500.
So that's just incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a community-wide embracement.
It was
across the state, and I hopefully, like, other communities will look to Muskegon and
I really,
they set the example. I mean, the bar is so high.
I really hope so. You know, it was funny. I remember walking around Cannabis, you know, and I would go and check on vendors. I was making sure internet Wi-Fi was working. I mean, they're running point of sale systems off of Wi-Fi, you know, and I'm just trying to make sure everybody's okay. And, you know, and I'm walking through the concert space, trying to get back to backstage where I was at because it was right by Will Call. And I would stop and I would ask attendees, you know, what do you know, hi, my name's Connie. I'm kind of responsible for this thing. You know, can you give me some feedback?
Right.
It reminded me a lot of kids in a candy shop. I think at one point, like when Willie J. Peso, which by the way, if you ever need a great MC for a concert, Willie J. Peso is it. He's hilarious. He is fun. The crowd loves him. But at one point, they were handing out free pre-rolls at the front of the stage.
Oh, awesome.
Which if you're at a cannabis cup, you know that that's for you to go up and grab.
Right.
But if you've never been to a cannabis cup, you don't understand what these things are that you guys have been doing at Hash Bash and other events.
Right.
All for the last 12 or however many years, right? These people don't know those things. Like they don't even know what a dab is. I mean, this is the general public that know nothing about caregivers. They know nothing about medical cards. They're here to smoke weed, and probably some of them maybe for the first time in a long time since college. I mean, they're like, well, shit, we'll check it out.
Exactly.
And they were like kids in a candy shop. And I had to tell them, I'm like, they're giving out hundreds of free pre-rolls. Go to the stage. What are you doing? They're like sitting there. And I'm like, and so I just really noticed that the people that were there and I would dare say a lot of the Muskegon local people were there because the public was curious.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why we priced the tickets the way that we did.
It was affordable. $25?
$25.
I mean,
we had 18 musical acts. We had, 53 cannabis brands. We had 8 vending booths.
Exactly.
We had 2 dab bars, food trucks, smoke lounges.
Food was amazing.
And that's that's exactly it. I mean, I think everybody just kind of walked around and they were like
blown away. Literally.
They're like, this is legal?
Yes.
I know somebody wrote, and I thought it was kind of silly. I posted it on my Facebook because it seemed really silly, but he said, the largest drug deal in Western civilization, and to some degree, largest legal drug deal.
Oh, okay, legal.
In Western civilization. And you got to kind of agree with him that was a pretty large legal drug deal.
Yeah, that was huge.
And and I kind of walked around looking at it, and for me, as somebody that came from the government, that was my form of activism because I voted for that. I voted yes for Prop 1.
Yes.
That was county public policy, community development expert demonstrating to my government that cannabis brings in economic development. That was my form of activism.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's why I did it.
Yep.
And
I love that.
And that's honestly, it may not be the activism of the past, but I think there's something really important that this industry needs to learn now. Activism comes in many forms with evolution.
It does.
And that was my absolute form. And every time I drive down a road of a municipality that I helped opt in or wrote an ordinance to opt in for, and I see their property values going up, and I see their blighted or abandoned streetscapes now freshly painted with brand new buildings, and there's commerce and there's people.
So good.
That's exactly why I did it. I did it from the outside because I got so pissed that I couldn't fix it from the inside.
Exactly.
So I'm like, screw this.
I love that, Connie. I love how you found a way to work the system.
I did.
You did.
Within the rules that it gave me that I voted for.
Yes.
And that's exactly the point. It's like, we voted for this. Now I'm going to use this as an economic generator in my community. And I don't have to work for the government to do that. I can do it. I can do it outside of the government, and I can still bring forward what our residents need, which is parks maintained and streets improved and parks and rec programming. That's what I define social equity as, is using cannabis excise tax and property tax revenue to make our communities better.
Now, you've created a social equity fund.
I did, yes.
And what's it called?
The Canna Social Equity Foundation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Or
it's
foundation, not
foundation.
yes.
But it's the fund. It's a fund within the foundation, and we're working on the language of this because it's a very different concept for people. When I started writing the medical licenses, I started seeing all the community givebacks in there, and I quickly realized like United Way is not going to be able to take this money.
No.
They're federally funded.
Yeah, which is sad.
And it is. It's very sad.
Yes. Yeah.
And so a United Way or those good community partners that are doing really good capacity building at the local level. Nonprofits, and a lot of people don't understand this, nonprofits struggle with capacity, planning staff to carry the workload. They can always get a project funded. It's the work that needs to get done that they have a hard time getting funded. So what I did is I built a community foundation working with the prior community foundation president and also an attorney for the Muskegon County Community Foundation, who was also my professional and personal mentor for many, many years, and Sean Gallagher. And I kind of noodled this around, and Dan and I noodled it around. It had a couple of iterations in the beginning because you guys didn't exist. And so we were like, well, maybe this is an industry association.
Right.
But then you guys came along like, no, that doesn't make sense either. And so basically it's just a community foundation for licensees. I accept the money in, we track it, account for it, make it compliant, report it back to the state. And then either the licensee can determine how they want that money spent, or a nonprofit can come with the licensees and set up a fund for that nonprofit.
Oh my goodness.
And we can administer the money down to the nonprofit safely.
Okay.
And so it's an arm's length away for the nonprofit to be able to say, we actually received this from a community foundation.
Oh my goodness.
Not the actual licensee directly.
Right.
And so as we're working through the IRS stuff, which is not easy, it takes forever. I think it took 3 years for the one in Grand Rapids to finally get through.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Yeah, no,
That's insane.
it's impossible. The IRS is like, what are you doing? You're washing money? And I'm like, no.
This is all legal.
This is all normal. It's just that's cannabis. Stop freaking out. And so we're working on, the bylaws and what the IRS is looking for from us to make sure that, we can get that 501c3 status. We're incorporated as a nonprofit in the state of Michigan, but that takes work to get through that stuff because we're doing it so uniquely. I'm challenging even the IRS's concepts of how to administer this stuff.
Oh my goodness.
If you think about it correctly.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, wow.
I'm coming at them within their own tax laws as an administrator saying, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
Tell me it's illegal.
Oh, you are.
I want you to
out there.
I want you to tell me this is illegal. And it's going to take a while because they're going to quickly find out that that's not the case. It's not illegal.
Right.
A community foundation that is not accepting federal funding, which we won't.
Wow.
Has no problem taking that money in. And I'm incorporated at the state level as a nonprofit. So it's a matter of, so as we wait on the Safe Banking Act, there are people already trying to challenge the internal administrative triggers and pulleys on purpose, another form of activism. Activism looks a lot different. If you're not going to pass the Safe Banking Act, then I'm going to be up your ass about this equity foundation.
Exactly.
Because right now I'm stuck and so are they, and it's a state mandate. So you're going to have to tell me what it is that you're going to do to help us with this. And until it's just like Michael Toohey, right? With his med card and probation, until somebody starts like challenging that authority.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
With practical challenging the authority of government to destigmatize cannabis through a festival of that size at Cannabash is a form of activism. But it's also an evolution from the activism you guys spent so much time doing.
Right. And it's true because it's such a broad spectrum, and it's helping everyone to understand, again, this is legal. It's okay. Relax, break down the stigmas. You're not going to go crazy. No,
you're not.
No one's going to break in. I mean, crime's not going to increase.
In fact, if anything, there were no incidents at Cannabash. There was no arrests. There was no citations. There's no fights. There's no medical emergencies. The only incident there was, and yes, Kelly Garrity, I'm calling you out, for running out of gas at the entrance to Cannabash at 2:00 in the afternoon.
As everybody was walking in.
Causing the largest traffic jam Apple Avenue has ever seen. So thank you, True North Collective.
Oh, it wasn't.
And I was like, what in the hell is going on? Because I'm getting phone calls from the ambulance because they're stuck in traffic because they're supposed to be there for a standby, right?
Oh,
I'm like,
oh, that's horrible.
no, she ran out of gas.
I
Jamie Cooper was with her. I was like, oh my God, you guys did what? And I didn't find out about it until I was walking around to the vendor tents, right? I was checking on our Verts tent, and Jamie and Kelly were right next to us, or 2 down from our Verts tent, right? And I walked past, and she was like, Kelly ran out of gas. I was like, that was you guys? It was like 20 minutes worth of shit for the 2 of you. Like,
That's
and I was just messing with them. But
oh my goodness.
No, it was pretty funny. So that was the only incident was Kelly Garrity running out of gas.
Hey, you know what?
I'm fine with it.
That was a fabulous event. Nothing. I mean, seriously though,
there was no incident.
No incidents.
No, the only things that the cops were upset about was, we went a couple of hours over on production, and the neighbors started complaining, and rightfully so, and they're screaming at us. Yeah. Why are you guys off? We're doing, but I paid $40,000. People are going to play.
Yeah.
But And so Cannabis was an extreme demonstration of activism by my community as well.
And how it can be done correctly.
Exactly. Every community member that went there decided to have the courage to show their peers that they are cannabis smokers. Yeah. And I can tell you, even after rec legalization, you would not believe the amount of colleagues and friends in higher positions of power that were good friends with me that would call me and ask me to go get edibles from a rec dispensary for them.
Oh my goodness. And
I'm like, or you just go.
Why am I doing this?
You're closer to it.
I'm not your errand girl.
I'm like, it's legal. Do you go to a liquor store? Do you buy cigs? Have you ever bought cigarettes?
No one cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention to you. There's not a camera. There's not somebody with an iPhone going, oh my God, did you just see blah, blah, blah? Was that the dispo? Like,
no one cares.
Go. Yeah. Like, it's not a big deal. In fact, we want you to.
Right.
And so I started realizing that even people that were looking to use cannabis as an alternative to maybe something else that they're on, they had their own personal stigmas.
Exactly.
And I was like, well, that's not going to work either because cannabis is such an incredible tool and I can sit and talk about it. But there's an intimidation to going into a dispo, whether or not anybody in cannabis wants to admit that. If you've never been in a dispo and don't know shit about pot, that's a really overwhelming place.
It is.
Right?
It is.
Like if you don't know the difference between a butter, a batter, a sugar, moon rocks, what is all this
deer in
shit?
headlights.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, and and depending on who the bud tender is and the way that it feels, do you have, I equated to going into a sex toy shop, I believe, for the first time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're right.
I bet it's the same experience, right? Like kind of a little bit embarrassed, a little bit like, kind of like, feeling guilty or I'm doing something bad. And it's like,
see me in here.
Exactly. And it's like, this is ridiculous. Like what? And so I finally stopped saying no. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Go to the dispo, go ask. This is what I recommend. This is what I did to start on edibles to help with my insomnia. What are you struggling with?
Yes.
So I kind of did that interim bud tender role for the bud tender just to get them through the door and be like, you know what, go see so-and-so at Pure Options or go see so-and-so at Kai, and I would just send somebody off to a really good bud tender, usually a female, right?
Right.
Because I think women feel more comfortable with female bud tenders.
We do, yeah.
And just ask them questions. That's what they're there for. God, Lord, do you talk to your pharmacist? They're like, yeah. I'm like, what's the problem? So
it's just that comfort level.
And it was, and I think that cannabis to a lot of the general public was a sigh of relief. And on top of that, I got a lot of questions on having the hip hop lineup that I did with the way that things are in Muskegon. And I looked at people and said, my community is a good community and I'm not worried about it. I want my community to be able to enjoy the music that it likes and be able to smoke some weed while they're doing it.
Exactly.
And that was what we did. Connie. I said, this was Dan and I sat like 2 days after Cannabis and watched Bone Thugs on YouTube from somebody's phone upside down,
that's
right?
So exciting.
Because we didn't even get to see it because we were working, right?
Yeah.
And so we're sitting on the couch and I looked at Dan and I said, I've been waiting for a hip hop concert in Muskegon, like an old school, like hip hop concert,
Right.
like from my high school years to come to Muskegon for 20 years. Right.
Wow, yeah.
And it's all hard rock or it's jazz or it's blues. And that's all great music. And I love all that music. Right. But I've wanted to go see a hip hop concert in my own community.
Right.
And I finally threw a hip hop concert in my own community and I couldn't even see it. Like, I was like, it's ridiculous. It was just, I looked at Dan, he goes, we didn't even get to see our own concerts. Right. But it was the, I got up on stage, Jamie, I was really exhausted and I reached out to Jamie Cooper, a couple days before and I'm like, oh, I forgot how hard I used to manage like medical conferences for continuing education and stuff like that. And I remember really struggling as Cannabis was coming. I'm just like, oh gosh, this is just a lot, right? And Jamie's like, there's a moment. You'll get your moment where it was all worth it. I got on stage with Willie, thank God, because he really calmed me down because I hadn't been on stage in front of a lot of people like that in a long time. He used to publicly speak and it wasn't a big deal, but like it had been a while. And I was announcing the Hero Project raffle.
Oh.
Because we did a raffle for the Hero Project and raised almost $1,200
oh my gosh,
for veteran discharge upgrades.
Yes.
And so I was announcing the raffles and to go to the Verts booth to buy the raffle and what it was about and what veteran discharge upgrade clinics were. And I stood there for a minute and, the sun was kind of just sitting right there. And I could just see, crowds of people sitting on blankets and they were eating and smoking weed. And I got really kind of overwhelmed and emotional because it was like, it was everything you guys wanted to be able to do.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It was everything that you guys wanted to be able to do, that you put all the passion into Prop 1.
Right.
And
it's legal.
It's happening, you guys.
It's in the public.
Here you go, guys.
Yeah.
This is what you did. Come look at it.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we tend to not stop and reflect back on what we did get accomplished.
Exactly.
Because we're so focused on moving forward that we don't take a minute to be like, what's the purpose of this?
Right.
And my purpose was to be an activist in my community, to exercise within the rules that I voted for, that I had a right to access, right? And to destigmatize my community so that my colleagues and friends, specifically women in leadership positions, would feel comfortable going to a dispo because they have insomnia.
I love that, Connie.
That's why I did it.
Thank you.
Like, seriously.
Yeah. We're at our hour mark.
Oh. Sorry.
I want to keep going, but
no, absolutely.
But I mean, you are a wealth of knowledge. You are like in the trenches. You're out there. You're doing it. You know what's going on. And I thank you so much, for all that you do and helping to break down the stigmas and educate. And
I can tell you that having written every license but safety facilities, right? Because I'm certainly not a lab scientist. That is definitely a stretch too far for me, right? But I've written every other license that the state has to offer except for a research license.
Okay.
But I've seen this industry operate in many different ways, either in the startup or the compliance side of it. But then I also see how the industry impacts my community and the state as a whole. And as somebody that has continued to find ways to create new revenue streams for government, which was my job, cannabis is a godsend.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm really thankful to be a part of cannabis.
Well, we're thankful to have you too.
And I'm thankful for the time with you.
Yeah, I know. I love how it's, it's bringing me friends. It's bringing me
I'm sure it is.
Really good friendships.
That's great.
Yeah.
It should.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to that brand activation at the bed and breakfast, right?
Yeah.
It's cannabis requires personal relationships.
Yeah.
Probably exhausting for somebody with autism sometimes, but at the same
it's
time,
exhausting no matter what.
It is. But I think the other thing for me is that I've met a lot more. I've met a lot more accepting people in cannabis than in other career paths. And so I think the cannabis community as a whole is filled with just incredible heart. And I think that that's just a nice home to be in, to call that your colleague home when there's people like you and Robin and Sean Gallagher is a colleague and a good friend. When you have just some really great people in your life that honestly care about you and you work with them.
Right.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say so too.
I think it's really unique to cannabis, though.
It is. That's why I love my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's meaningful.
It is. Yeah. And it has purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that's all we have today. Thank you so much for joining me and for sharing a little bit about, what you do and your passions and your goals and dreams. We didn't cover a whole lot. I gotta figure this out, man. I have so much fun doing my podcast.
You're doing fine. Well, you get into conversations that I think for you, the audience well enough because you work with everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see all sides of what's going on in industry wise. Like you have a really good perspective. And I think you also understand what the general public is curious about. You have an interesting way of storytelling it.
Oh, well, thank you.
You'll get your groove down, I promise.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you all for joining us today. This is Ida with Light a Joint with Ida and Connie. Next week, I have a really special treat in store. So I hope you're all able to join us on Monday at 11. Talk to y'all then. Bye-bye.